Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 108 featuring the one and only Matt Emig. You guys already see him on screen. Real quick, just to get it out of the way, sport karate news this week. There was obviously the huge news of Raymond Daniels signing with Karate Combat. Everybody understands why that's a big deal. I also got on the Karate Combat website last night and was looking up some of the information. They don't have his opponent yet, but he's fighting middleweight. Middleweight is the division that Ross Levine just won the title in, and everybody knows about the great fights that Raymond Daniels and Ross Levine have had over the years. So I think there's a whole lot of exciting potential there. Also, something that didn't hit the news as much is that Dean Barry is also another sport karate guy, of course. He's going to be fighting on that Karate Combat card as well. So really exciting news for kind of the point fighting revolution within Karate Combat. And obviously, we wish the best of luck to those competitors. And then the obvious U.S. Capitol Classics is this weekend. So next week's show, we'll be talking all about everything that went down at the U.S. Capitol Classics. I think the only other elephant in the room is the fact that the Adrenaline Championships went down. But I wasn't able to watch it live. I've got a whole bunch of military training stuff this week, so I don't really even know what happened yet. But shout out to Adrenaline Worldwide, and I'll study up on that, and we'll get some more news out, maybe discuss that a little bit more next week. But anyway, that's it for Sport Karate News this week. We always cover that at the top of the show, so I wanted to get that out of the way. And now we got Matt Emig on the podcast, so it's time to talk to Matt Emig. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time, my man, and I'll start. Tell the people who you are if they don't already know, which they should, but give us the introduction to Matt Emig here.
Well, first, thanks for having me back, Jackson. Episode 108. It's our second time doing it. And congratulations to you. You just got married.
Thank you.
It's awesome. About myself, I guess everybody who's watching probably already knows I used to compete in sport karate tournaments. I was on Team Paul Mitchell. I do nunchucks, a trick, forms, that whole thing.
I love that. I do nunchucks. Not I'm the best nunchuck competitor of all time. I do nunchucks.
I'm okay,
Occasionally, right? I used to do sport karate, Anyway, but no, so for real, let's talk about like what's been going on with you recently, because I know obviously working in the stunt industry, having all kinds of success in that, but then also overcoming an injury recently. So tell us a little bit about kind of maybe the last year and what's kind of been going on.
So last summer we wrapped up on Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then I went out to Hawaii to work on NCIS Hawaii and jumped off a second-story parking garage to a truck. First one went fine. I was on a wire. Second one, when I landed, my foot just collapsed and I fractured my ankle. So I was out for about 8 months. And then, just training, PT, just trying to recover. And then, of course, once you get back to 100% in the doctor's minds, it's not, our skill level. So I'm just trying to relearn tricking, get my skills back, get my health back. This last week, I was working on a movie called Incoming. I was just working on a Netflix show called Brother Son. And that's pretty much it. Just training, trying to get back to 110%,
That's awesome. And for context, I want to go through because most of our audience is either sport karate audience that comes here specifically for sport karate, or they're people that are followers of Black Belt Magazine that just wind up at the podcast because they're like, oh, cool, this is on Black Belt Magazine. Let's check it out, right? So within the stunt industry, right, you list off a whole bunch of things that were like just happening. At any given time, like how many different stunt projects are you working on? Is it kind of like you're on set for one thing and then you immediately move to another? Are there like dry spells and super busy times? Like how does your schedule kind of work in general?
Sometimes you're on set and someone calls for another show and you just happen to be lucky and you're finishing this week and it starts next week or tomorrow and you're available. That's happened before. Other times, there's a couple months off and there's no work, or a couple weeks off. It's different too, because some shows you could work on for one day. Sometimes it's 1 week, and then sometimes it's 8 or 9 months. So it varies.
Cool. And then the process of when an injury happens, right? Because it's a field that it's going to happen. It's part of the job, right? Everybody's going to get hurt at some point. So is there any support system from like the employer set up for stuff like that? Or is it just kind of like, we're sorry you got hurt, like go get better?
I was on workman's comp.
Okay.
So, they kind of set you up. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd prefer just to be healthy and working.
Of course. Right.
I was losing my mind for a little bit. just not being able to walk because I was non-weight bearing for, I think, 2.5 months.
Mhm.
So it's really annoying. I mean, I've come back from other injuries with my knee 2 other times. So I've done it before. I know what to do, but it's still frustrating. And each time it takes a little bit more out of me.
No, I
But,
understand that for sure.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying I understand. What's up?
Oh, yeah. It could be tough. But, you do it. You manage. It's life. It's a lesson,
For sure. So now we're going to dive into like the normal part of the podcast. And for anybody that tuned in to the episode that I did with Sammy, obviously one of your pupils, the episode that I did with Sammy last week, we kind of tried a new vibe on the podcast where like, I feel like for 100 episodes or better, it was very like formal interview structure, which really isn't what a podcast is. A podcast is a discussion. It's a conversation about topics, right? And so now that's what we want to dive into. And one thing, anytime, because I mention your name a lot on this show, and a lot of the times I talk about the way that you changed sport karate, because I believe that truly great competitors, they change the sport. The sport looks different when that competitor is done than it did when they started, right? You can say that about Carmichael Simon and Mike Chatt and John Valera. You can say that about yourself. You can say that about Kalman. There's few competitors throughout history that you can say truly changed sport karate. And so one innovation that I feel like goes underappreciated from your career is finger rolls. And it's the type of thing that nobody thinks about, right? Because they think about you doing the statue and they think about the rodeo corks and they think about all of the Chuck stuff. But I'm like, no. Watch the way the man finger rolls, because what you brought to nunchucks with the art of finger rolls, because they really weren't a thing very much, at least before you started doing them and innovating them, right? So tell everybody about that. Help everybody know that I'm not crazy in trying to get them to look at your finger rolls.
So at the time, this was a time where in weapons, the only competitors that threw their weapon up in the air and caught them were staff guys, and it was one release. Like if you had one release in your form, that was already insane. Kama's, Chuck's, sword, nobody released their weapon. Hand rolls have been around forever before I started doing Chuck's. The challenge for me was showcasing the hand rolls to the judges, because in the beginning I would put it in my form and they didn't appreciate it. They didn't even know I was doing it. In fact, some of the feedback I'd get back was I moved slower in this section, and I'm like, no, I was wrapping them around my hands and I was twirling it around. They thought I just went from one speed to a slower speed. Maybe I lost my endurance and they went back. And even people in the crowd, the competitors in the division, no one really appreciated it. Nobody was like really impressed. So then I stopped doing them. Because sometimes you can make a mistake too. It was risky for what? Right. No one even cares. And then I came up with the idea of doing it in the intro before I start spinning my chuck. So the first thing you see is a hand roll, and then you can see my hand. I'm purposely kind of going slow down to my knee. Then boom, you come up off your knee. You're hitting beats. I would finger roll and then pause. So there's a break. There's no finger roll and then a million strikes afterwards where you can't see anything. And it seemed to work. The judges appreciated it. Competitors, everybody seemed to realize and understand and appreciate what I was doing. So then I was kind of like my little formula. Then I was trying to add it into the form, the actual base of the form again. Then I realized I just had to dumb it down and go simple, but just hand roll and like really showcase it, bring the chuck up really high or really low, or do a hand roll and then do some different types of strikes, some body movement afterwards. So really, really stands out. And if you look, I never really did anything that hard in the actual base of the form, or at least compared to other moves I could do. But yeah, that was really the challenge, just showcasing. And I'm sure you have moves too that are incredibly hard, and we just don't really know the difference between that and something else. So it's just easier to do something else.
Right.
And that's something challenging yourself,
Right. And that's something I've noticed in the sport today, is that it almost seems like in some of these divisions, kids especially are just trying to go for whatever the hardest stuff is. And it's like whoever can hit the hardest form is going to win. But we've seen, if we watch it, who actually wins the overall grands, it's not always the most difficult form that winds up going all the way and winning. And part of that is because that's not what it's all about, right? A good judge should look at the martial arts aspect of it. There's the performance aspect. There's everything else about a form other than just difficulty that should make the difference. But the other side of it is exactly what you're saying. And it's that the judges don't always know if you're doing something that nobody's ever seen before, especially, they don't know how hard it is. It's really hard to compare. Like when you see somebody throw a bow and spin 3 times and catch it, how does that compare to somebody that threw both of their commas and then caught one behind their back and spun around and caught the other behind their head? Well, like the bow guys spun more, but the comma guys, it was a more complex technique that they did. So how do you compare those two things, right? And so just speak a little bit to that strategy of to win, you don't always have to do the most difficult thing.
Yeah, you don't always have to do the most difficult thing. And sometimes dumbing it down actually is better. There's releases I've done in my form. There's releases I've done and people don't appreciate and just realize how hard it is and the difficulty, the challenge to stick it. So then you just don't do it as much. And then there's certain moves like releasing it, going around the neck, catching the other chuck. That seems to work. It's like a happy medium. People love it and it's not that hard for me. There's other moves that were so hard and I'm like, no one cares. You know what? That crowd response wasn't enough. I'm not doing that anymore. It's too risky, or it costs you the win. So I think it's finding a balance in your form. I remember the first time you threw the staff up and you caught it on your fingers or your hand first.
Yeah.
I thought that was so impressive. And then after like a tournament or two, I asked you, I'm like, hey, how hard is that move? And you're like, that's one of my easiest tricks. But that was like when you first did that, and then of course later you did it to the fingers. I feel like that stopped the crowd. Everybody just was like that, it was a perfect ending. And it was probably one of the easier tricks that you threw, so there's certain moves, they're just super easy and they work. Those are the best moves. The ones that are easy, they work. Everybody loves them. Then there's the moves that are really hard. But sometimes you want to challenge yourself too. So I understand that end of it too, where you want to throw a weapon up, spin around 3 times, catch it behind your back, because it is a challenge, or do something no one's ever done before, even if you really don't need it, just want to. You're in competition with yourself. So sometimes you take that route.
Of course. And I think that's where innovation outweighs difficulty, right? It's not like there's just going to be some random move out there that everybody can do that's easy that all of a sudden everybody thinks is cool. No, like in order to get that effect, in order for it to be the perfect ending move, it has to be something that people haven't seen because that's what catches the eye. And if it just so happens to be easy, then that's an added bonus, right? And that's why it's important to stay ahead of the curve on innovation, right? And you're exactly right. Like the Chris Angel, the reason it was so impressive wasn't because it was super hard. A month after I did it, there were 9-year-olds that could do it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They didn't sell it the same, but they could land the trick. So part of it is presentation. And then another huge part of it is being ahead of that innovation curve. And there's a lot of value in being the first person to do something. Because that's the other thing. Like, Matt, if somebody went out there today and threw the chuck up and then did the neck roll or the back roll or whatever, and then caught it, then the judges aren't going to be like, oh, that was crazy. They're going to say, oh, that's what Matt did. And sometimes you'll get respect for it because the judges will be like, oh, they just did the same thing Matt Emig did. But other times they'll be like a Joe Greenhall would be like, I've seen that before. Matt did that 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Right? And that's part of it. So I'm curious because you mentioned that there were moves that like they were really hard for you and you went out there and did it and then it didn't get the response that you wanted, whether it was from the judges or the crowd or whatever, right? Because at some point we compete for both, the judges and the crowd, right? Do you remember a specific one, like maybe one that you thought was like the hardest move that you went for and then it just landed flat? Because I've had those too.
Yeah. So when they first started creative weapons in 2004, I didn't really take the division serious. I'd win extreme weapons. I'm like, all right, I won, and now I'm going to freestyle in creative. And that's what I did. And nobody really knew like what kind of division it was going to be. So I would just test out. I completely just freestyled. And I would test different moves and then I'd get different reactions. And also sometimes it's the way you perform it too. So sometimes I would just perform bad, redo it, and then everybody likes it. So like the one around the neck, I did that in 2004 actually. And it was really scary. And then I just stopped doing it. No one really released that. At that time, the sword was just starting to be released. Commas definitely did not. Maybe 1 or 2 chuck people, but it was like 1 release, And staff. And again, staff, it was maybe you did 2 releases now. They weren't doing combos like you were. Right. So yeah, that move's kind of old. The one behind the back, again, 2004. At that time, I didn't have it figured out. So I was like reaching for it. And then the judges were like, yeah, you were reaching for your weapon. I don't know if I like that. And then that's when I realized too, like if you stand up and you release and catch, it's a little bit easier because you could reach and it's not so much. If you're in a stance, you're stuck. So there's certain releases you want to stand up, catch your weapon. There's certain moves you want to get into a stance, release it because you can't move. As soon as you do that, depending on how competitive the division is, they can mark you down for that. But yeah, you said the hardest tricks. What was something I was trying to do? I'm trying to think. To be honest, I'm not even sure. I used to just freestyle, and then sometimes you'd make stuff up on the spot. Some of my best stuff were at local tournaments, just freestyling. That's what I used to also do. And then I would test out because there's like a live audience reaction, because sometimes what I think is cool is not what everyone else thinks is cool, and vice versa. So sometimes I would just mess around, and then I'm like, oh, everybody likes that. You know what? Let me try to perfect that move. Then I would try to clean it up.
Yeah. That was me in warm-ups, because I didn't once I got to Paul Mitchell level and everything, I didn't really do local tournaments anymore because I didn't see any value in it for me personally. And so, but what I would do is I would do new stuff when I was warming up. It had a double purpose, right? The first purpose was if I do stuff that I know I'm not going to do in my form, but if I'm warming it up, then all my competitors think I'm going to do it, right? So then all of a sudden that gets in their heads and they start changing their forms because they think I'm going to do something crazy, and I do the same thing I always do, right?
Back to your hand rolls before when I did take them out of my form because I didn't figure out how to showcase it. I used to do that to try to intimidate my competition. I'd be doing all my craziest hand rolls. Then it used to actually relax my hands. It would make them less sweaty. And I was just trying to get in their heads, really. Yeah. And then I'd do the form and they'd be 0 hand rolls.
Right. And that's a real thing. If you're not trying to intimidate your competitors in warm-ups, you're missing an opportunity. If you can get in somebody's head, then you've already won the division. You know what I'm saying? But then the other part of it is I would do stuff that I was maybe working on in the vault, right? And then if I noticed that when I did it, the little crowd of people around the ring as you're warming up, I'm oh, then I'm oh, okay. So 3 tournaments from now, that's coming out. You know what I'm saying? But another thing that I think is interesting about your generation, because we're going to talk about, I always say on the podcast, in order to be a great competitor, you have to beat great competitors. You need other greats in your generation in order for yourself to be considered.
Definitely.
Right. And so I think your generation was one of the deepest, right? Particularly in weapons, where I tell people on the show all the time, Rudy Raynon is the best comic competitor of all time, in my opinion. I think you are the best nunchucks competitor of all time. I think Kalman is the best sword competitor of all time. So literally 3 goats of particular weapons in the same generation competing against each other. But at the same time, it almost seemed like the 3 of you had totally different philosophies on releases, right? Kalman went all in, and Kalman did, I think his most release heavy forms were 6, 7 releases, right? Mm-hmm. And then you always had 1 to 3 somewhere in there,
yeah, exactly, 1 to 3.
Yeah, exactly. Then Rudy never released his comments. He was all finger rolls and cuts, right? So talk a little bit about that. And as Kalman starts to do more releases, did that affect you wanting to do some? The fact that Rudy never did any. I think he did a few releases in his last couple of years, right? But just talk about is there kind of that hesitation to pull those out? Because admittedly, as one of the guys who did a bunch of them, there was a period of time where releases they were taboo. People didn't like too many of them.
Yeah, I think that even when you say our generation, there's us as 13 and under, teenager, and then as adults. So, saying Kalman did a lot of releases as an adult, yes. But then you go back to when he was 14, there was 0 releases, So I feel this is the trends. And I feel early on, Kalman is the twirls, Rudy was just finger rolling them. Same with me. It was hand rolls and finger rolls. You didn't really think to release. And at the time, it was really hard if you did a release. And that's why staff did 1 release, and it was only a few people. And then at the time, too, I remember sword. At the time, I remember thinking if you released a sword and messed up, you'd have to go to the hospital. You'd cut your hand. And they used to make weapons a lot sharper. My original commas, I remember horsing around with my friends, and you could stick the comma in a breaking board. I remember sticking it, and I had trouble getting it out. And my mom used to always yell at me for jumping on my trampoline with my commas. She thought I was going to poke my eye out. Or stab myself or something, which I was no, I got control. It's not going to happen. Don't worry. But I was 9 years old. So I feel the way they made weapons, plus weapons were a little bit heavier. They weren't as balanced. They weren't designed for these tricks. And I feel as we started to come up with these tricks, they started getting better grip tape and lighter weapons and made them more for performance. So yeah, I think that's why we didn't do releases, Rudy and I. It was just hand rolls and finger rolls, or for him, finger rolls, and there's the twirls.
Right.
And then it came into like that sword era, and then like the staff era, where it was like around the shoulders and the neck and all that stuff. And then, yes, then to keep up, you got to just evolve with the times. So then that's when I was doing like 1 to 3 releases, probably more on the 3 side, and that's when I was messing up a lot. And something I didn't realize at the time: chucks are not sword. Yeah, I can't be Kalman. Sword is not commas. Commas are not staff. Each weapon is used different. So you don't have to, if I was competing against you, it'd probably, and I'm sure some people could do it, but it'd probably be foolish of me to try to do a combo like yours where I'm like, release, 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 spin around, catch, catch. I'd probably butcher it. That's your style. That's your weapon. I have to do what I'm good at. And I think like the last time I competed against Kalman, I figured that out. I was like, you know what? I think I only need like 1 release and then like 1 little trick where they come together. And then, maybe a hand roll here or there, or not even. And that seemed to work. Because another thing that I was good at was spinning the chucks while I flipped. That's kind of what put me on the map. So I feel like you got to be in competition to keep up with the trends, what the other weapons are doing. But sometimes it's apples to oranges. You can't really compare. You got to do what you're best at.
Right. And I tell students that all the time. Sometimes you have to intentionally make it apples to oranges, right? Like that's what I did with tricking. When I was 11 years old, I lost to every tricker on the planet. Because in the weapons division, like if you could do a cork and flash kicks with commas, you were beating my basic bow form every time. Like the reason I started releasing as much as I did is because I couldn't trick. And so I'm like, I'm not going to go learn tricking because I can't learn tricking in 6 months. Not to the level of the guys who were beating me at the time, like a Jacob Pinto or an Austin Crane or whoever, right? Like that wasn't going to happen. So I needed to find my own thing. I needed to make the judges not compare what we were doing that was the same, but make the judges compare apples to oranges and pick what style was better. And then ultimately, that's what worked out, right? And I love that you bring up the tricking while spinning the chucks, because that's probably your most famous innovation, right? But I want to hear it from you. If you had to say, because, I've listed maybe 5 or 6 over the course of the show already. What would you say, like we'll make it 3. What are your 3 biggest innovations, your biggest contributions that like we still see competitors doing today?
For weapons forms, both?
Both. Put them together.
So for weapons, it was like spinning the chucks while flipping. And then, now you could see other people flipping and spinning commas and staffs and stuff, which I think is cool. And then, I just evolved that. So I went from spinning to flipping, to kicking, to twisting, then comboing it. Then, I started hitting it between my legs, which I thought was cool, doing an X out, hitting the back of my legs and the front, then twirling, doing a raise and passing the chucks through my legs. So for weapons, I'd probably say that. Something else I don't think we've ever talked about is music. I had the first DJ Neve song.
No way.
Mixed, 2002 US Open. And he mixed it. Then I was like, can you make this beat louder? Can you add this beat here? Can you add an extra beat here? Take this one out. So we were like kind of going back and forth. And now there's like a formula, where you bow and you hit the beat. You come up, you turn, you snap your head, you walk into the ring. There's like these set beats. That wasn't a thing when I first started competing. And Neve and I, we kind of, collaborate. He mixed the music, obviously, but I was just telling him what I wanted. But US Open 2002, that was the first time anyone's used a DJ Neve mix. Now, I don't know if people are using DJ Neve, but whoever they're using,
there's a lot of
like,
way, Yeah, there's a lot of DJ Neve. I don't want to say wannabes because some of them are pretty good, make good music. But there's a lot of like younger kids and everything that have like started doing the same thing and offer it. But I mean, DJ Neve, his quality is crazy. Like he puts out great stuff, and there's a ton of competitors that still use him. But I didn't know that. I want to know that story. So was it your idea to get him specifically to make body music? Like
AOL Instant Messenger. It wasn't like, for the people that don't know, it was like texting pretty much on your computer before texting was a thing. And it wasn't like social media where you just type in someone's name and you find their page. So I don't know how he found my AOL screen name, but he just messaged me. He was like, yo, I like your stuff. Yo, I mix music. I'm like, oh, okay. He was like, I'll mix one of your songs. So I just sent him one of the songs I was using at the time, my weapon song. And then he mixed it. And I'm like, it's kind of hot, but it doesn't really fit. And I'm like, can you make this longer? Can you add a beat here? And then he did it. And I'm like, can you add those beats? I'll make them a little bit louder. I need more time. Bow. And then some of it, he just kind of mixed and went off. And then I was kind of creating to the beats. So like the first time I used it, I went, I think I went like, I was talking to the judges and I like punched and walked back. And then I was like stepping backwards, hitting the beats. And then I did a raise moving backwards and I just walked to the back of the ring. So it was pretty epic. And I came up with that based off the beats, you know, because at first I was telling him to change a couple things, and he did. Then I kind of felt bad. I'm like, oh, I'm making a mix, some change the whole thing almost. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna be creative. And then I was part of it too. He'd send me music, and then I'd hear the beats, and I would try to, you know, make an intro to those beats. And that was back to what we were talking about with the finger rolls. That's when I was kind of starting to integrate the hand rolls and finger rolls. I kind of figured out a new way to put it in the form where you can showcase it, and it worked. You know, I'd go finger roll, boom, hit a beat, pause. You saw that move because I didn't do anything afterwards. Then bam, there's a hand roll and then a setup, and then, you know, you go into it. But yeah, so that's something cool that I feel kind of proud of, because I feel like everyone uses music real similar to that.
Now, at the time with the music, was it only the intro that you were hitting the beats, like those first few moves before you start going fast? Because like now the whole thing is that like people hit 4 beats in the intro and then they just do a form with background music. So
yeah, it was the walk
more so throughout, or what was the?
It was the walk in. It was the intro, and that was pretty much it. There was not any beats in the actual form, which doesn't make it a real musical form. A few times I had to cut to end, and I would finish to the music. But then sometimes you change your form, and it could be risky. But I recommend people doing more of a musical form for everyone else out there. That was like 20 years ago. So
yeah, and I mean, again, if you're the one who innovates it, then you get to own it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like when you did that 20 years ago, there was nobody using DJ Neve music. And so it was like cool and crazy that you were hitting those clashes like that, right? Mm-hmm. But then like now that people have done the same thing for 20 years, right? And this isn't an attack on the karate music remix industry. Still have the same people remix it. Just have them remix it different so that you can do like a new type of choreography and stand out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and all the people that are mixing music now are great. I've heard some songs. They're awesome. Sometimes I teach lessons and people come with a song and they're like, can you make something up to this? But yeah, that DJ Neve was the first, and I was the first person to use his music.
That's sick.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, so we got spinning the chucks while tricking. Yep. We've got using DJ Neve style music, which I learned that today, y'all. That's crazy. if you had to give us one more, what's one more contribution you're proud of?
Probably combos in open hand forms. Before I started doing big combos, the style of a form was like you did one big trick, a 720 off 2 feet, a double leg, boom. Then it was another big trick, crowd awakener, big trick, jump crescent kick, double leg, like a 2-hit combo. Right. That was the style when I was younger. I couldn't do all those moves, or I could, but I just looked like a little kid doing it. It wasn't as impressive seeing a 12-year-old do a 720 off 2 feet. My double leg, I barely made it over. So then I'm like, I'm just going to do a bunch of kicks and tricks and a mini combo, So then I started with like tornado, front sweep, appetito, aerial, where I do appetito to the splits. Then fast forward, I was doing like cheat 9, front sweep, raise gainer, or raise cork. And then now today, everyone kind of does that format. They do a big combo in the beginning, whether it's a backside 9 start or a cheat 9, or you're super leveled up and you're doing a 1260. Then you do some sort of cartwheel trick or a raise or touchdown raise or scoot to a big twist or flip. So that's what I did. I started with a kick, ended with a flip. Years later, ended with a twist. Then you do like a basic trick going forward, like a stall front kick or jump crescent kick or something easy. And maybe you hit one more banger, jackknife, swipe knife, and then, you go to the round-up flash kick, or today it would be like a full twist or a cartwheel trick. So that format, I feel like that's something I started and I see a lot of people do. There are some creative people, like Salif nowadays is insane. He's one of my favorites. He breaks that format. There's some people that break that format. They do something completely different. But also it is hard too, because you only have so much time. The ring size, the same shape size. Certain moves look good from certain angles. So we are kind of limited. The judges are in the front. Maybe if the judges were spread around, you could do something more creative, do something different, showcase in different things, different directions. So, you kind of base your form around the audience and the judges. But yeah, that's something I'm proud of too. When I watch forms, I'm like, I didn't make that up, but that format It's kind of me.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting idea with the way the judges and the audience are positioned, because people have talked about moving the judges to like center up front and then at least 2 on the corners, or maybe if you have a 5-judge panel, then do the 4 corners in the center, right? People have talked about that forever. But it makes me also think of like a lot of old school night shows back in the day had like amphitheater audiences, right? And so there was audience on all sides of the competitor. And I feel like I do think that if you had more night shows like that today, more competitors would try to adjust their forms to play to all 4 sides, instead of right now where you're right, forms are constructed to, even if it's the same stuff a lot, well, there's only so many different angles that a flash kick, if that's what you've got in your bag, right? There's only so many different angles that's going to present at its best, right? So I like the idea of if you had audience, if you had judges around the ring instead of just in front of the ring, I think that would change the way that people put together their forms. Because I think that's the number one thing people complain about, right? The number one complaint with sport karate right now is too many people look the same, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like if you had some element like that, or maybe a few elements like that about the sport that changed, that kind of forced competitors to need to do something different, well, everybody that's at the top is going to create a new different for them, right? And then all of a sudden you've got all this trickle down. But looping it all back together to your contributions, I mean, that is the reason that I tell people like the greatest CMX forms and weapons combined competitor of all time is Matt Emig. And it's because you're the guy who innovated that. And here we are 20 years later, and everybody's extreme form looks like your extreme form looked like. It's that format. You know what I mean? So again, if you want to claim to be the greatest of all time, you have to change the way the sport looks. Matt Emig has very clearly done that. Not to mention the fact that your music sounds just like his music did 20 years ago, but that's beside the point. Anyway, so now I want to get to, we're talking about like, you know, greats of all time and stuff like that, right? It's always been challenging to try to figure out like top 5 bow competitors all time, sword, commas, because there's so many that were so good. You know what I'm saying? With Chucks, there's fewer whoever ascended to be in that like elite you would consider greatest of all time in this sport, right? And so Sammy and I talked about this on the show last week, and I figured if I'm having Matt on the show, how can I not ask him? Who are your top 5 greatest Chucks competitors ever? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that you're number 1 so you don't have to say it yourself. So 1, but figure out the other 4.
Thank you for that. For Chucks, first, I guess I would have to say Bruce Lee, just for putting nunchucks on the map. That was kind of before my time, but from my understanding, he made nunchucks popular. You know.
So you're going nunchuck practitioners. You're not going, because I'm thinking competitors, but you're going like all of nunchucks ever.
Well, some of these are competitors too, but I think they're less known, to be honest. I'm going to say Wayne Nguyen. He's a competitor from back in the day. I think he might still be competing. I'm not sure. But he was in this movie called Sidekicks, and that's kind of where I got my style from. Kind of jack these over the head strikes, these looping 8 figure 8s. He had a lot of that stuff. It was just this fast, tight movement. So yeah, again, I kind of jacked his style when I was a young kid. And then this guy at my karate school, Ken Swam, he was older than me. He was probably like 16 or 17 when I was like 7 or 8. And he kind of took that same style we got from the movie Sidekicks and started spinning around while doing the over the head strikes and spinning around while doing these looping 8s, and started integrating hand rolls. Like in the beginning, it was just like basic hand rolls up and down. So then I started seeing him do stuff, you know, all of these new moves, but with hand rolls. And then I was just kind of trying to copy him. And some of the stuff I did copy, some of it I just copied as a 7-year-old, did it incorrectly and kind of made up my own thing. You know, I thought I was doing what he was doing, ended up being something new. Then I'm like, oh, and then I would copy what he did. Now I have 2 new moves, you know? So around like 7, 8 years old, I feel like I started learning all these moves from those 2 guys. And then after competing, then I kind of got into like NASCA style. You know, you have to like, everyone has a form, and then it's not really that top competitor, that top elite performance. You know, you just don't know these basic rules and stuff. So I kind of NASCA made my form more like for NASCA. And that's where I met Lee Barden, who's one of the owners of Black and Blue Productions. Mm-hmm. And he didn't compete that much, but he'd always be on the sidelines showcasing nunchucks. And he did a lot of cool tricks, a lot of hand rolls, a lot of finger rolls that I got from him. And at first he'd be like, you can't do these tricks unless you buy my nunchucks. He had these special wooden chucks. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm using my chucks. No one had chain chucks. That was another thing. Everybody uses chain chucks now, 3 links or 4 links. Back then, it was all octagon wooden rope chucks. They were really short. And actually, mine were 5 links at the time.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So then I was like, I want to do some of these finger rolls and stuff. It's easier if you have shorter, chain link. And also, I used to catch them under my armpits, and then I'd catch them. And the judges would say that was sloppy. So I figured if I had shorter, I could just catch them and then keep it moving, But yeah, Lee Barden, definitely. Bruce Lee, Wayne Nguyen, Ken Swam, Lee Barden. I guess if you put me in there. If not, then I guess today, more modern, I would say Sammy Smith and Danny Ekin.
Yeah. I mean, that's where Sammy and I were at. We were like, okay, there's Matt. And then Sammy and Danny, like, I had interchangeably. I'm like, pick your favorite, you know what I mean? Because they're both disciples of you. They both have a lot of your style, but then they also both had their own innovations. But I love the fact that you're bringing out some of those lesser known names. I know of Lee Barden, but I never got to see him in action. I've seen videos of him on YouTube doing the fire chucks and everything. But to your point, I never saw him compete.
And then some of the highlights stuff. Yeah, some of the highlight stuff is so old. It's from back in the day. And then again, he didn't do all his craziest tricks in his form, back then, because nobody was doing that. So, but there would be times where I was copying stuff from him, or he was showing me moves. And then it's funny, people have different, my eye sees something else. So he's showing off doing something. I'm like, well, what was that? What'd you just do right there? And then he's like, this move. And I'm like, no, I could do that. I could do that. I don't care about that. I don't like that. What's this? And then, I would see something different. And I'm like, ooh, I got to make that my own. And then I'm trying to figure out, how to make it to fit in my form and, add my own little twist to it. I think last year or 2 years ago, I think it was during COVID, there was a nunchuck battle. And I was impressed with pretty much everyone that competed. It was very impressive.
Oh, yeah, the online one that
online nunchuck
Evan Turner did. Yeah.
Several cool things. One, I think every person that competed in almost every round did at least one thing that I came up with. And I don't just mean tricks, actual twirls or strikes or a pose, which I took as a compliment. And if they didn't get it from me, they got it from somebody that I've trained or copied me. So that I thought was cool. And then also there was a lot of stuff that I have not done that I've seen people that they were trying new things. And I never thought of. So I thought that was cool. And then some stuff was things I've done, but they just kind of evolved it. And it was if I kept competing, I'd probably do that. Probably do something like that, But then there was some fresh stuff too that I've never seen before. Got me excited. So there's a lot of new upcomers out there.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And that's one thing that I do think is really cool is you do see a few more Chuck's competitors in the junior divisions than what you did when I was coming up. Because when I was coming up and you were at the top with Chuck's in the adult division, there were a lot of people who were almost scared to do Chuck's. I don't think I'd be as good as Matt, so I'm not going to, you know what I mean? And so for me, it was always bow guys and kama guys. That was our whole division was bow guys and kama guys. And I guess those are the two most popular weapons, right? Because trickers typically do kamas and bow is just every karate school ever has bows because they're just sticks. So they're easy to stock, right? So I feel like that makes sense. But it's funny you bring up Wayne Nguyen as well, because I need to go back and I need to find some footage of him from when he was younger. I've competed against him.
Oh, really?
He's a Chuck Norris black belt. And so a few years ago, when I would go out to Chuck Norris's convention and compete in the International Training Conference is what they call it, and compete for the Norris Cup, the last Norris Cup that I competed in that I won, the guy who was runner up to me was Wayne Nguyen. And I mean, he's probably in his 40s or whatever. I don't know. But and I noticed that even at his age and everything, he was very good. He was skilled, you know what I'm saying? So I need to go back and see some prime Wayne footage. Anything else you want to add about him?
And that makes sense because the movie Sidekicks is a Chuck Norris movie. So
exactly right.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But yeah, it's kind of cool. Again, coming full circle. So now we're gonna do another top 5, right? Because I also said, and I said this and then moved on from it, but it's a big deal, right? So my appreciation for Matt Emig, speaking to the audience now, goes beyond the fact that I think he's the greatest nunchuck competitor of all time. I go as far as to say, and this one's a little bit more controversial, that Matt is the greatest CMX competitor of all time, right? And if I was doing my top 5 to take the pressure off of Matt a little bit, because there's a good chance he's going to completely disagree with me. But I go Matt 1. The guy who a lot of people have at number 1 is my number 2. I go Valera at 2.
Okay.
And it's really tough for me. My 2 and 3 are really close because I've got Valera and Carmichael. And the reason I have Carmichael at 3 is because he was primarily known for forms, whereas Valera was more forms and weapons. And so that's why I give Valera the nod. But I can't discount like the amount that Carmichael contributed to like the evolution of the sport. And then also there's like the crazy story that I learned on this show when I had Carmichael on that like I used to think as a kid that like Carmichael and John Valera and Mike Chat were the top of that division for several years, right? But it was really Valera and Chat, and then Carmichael came up the year he turned 18 and then started beating them at a lot of the major tournaments, which I think is just crazy for it to be 2 competitors that were as great as Mike Chat and John Valera, and then Carmichael to just show up and like start winning as an 18-year-old. That's crazy because you don't typically see that. So I go Carmichael there. I probably should have thought about this more before the show because then 4 and 5, I feel a need to go more modern with 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Personally, I was always a huge Rudy fan. So I'm inclined to go Rudy in the top 5 because, again, this is forms and weapons combined. So like Kalman, who I love for weapons, like forms and weapons combined, it's a little bit harder to go there.
Well, he was the top forms competitor as a junior.
That's true.
As a junior, beating Kalman in weapons would be like, yeah, forms, I couldn't touch him. And then it switched.
Cool. Not a lot of people know that. Talk about that a little bit, then we'll get to your list.
Yeah, Kalman was good at weapons. You know, just there's competition, and I feel like I didn't always see him in runoffs, or if I did, I don't know. He wasn't the top guy I was worried about. But for forms, I'd be lucky just to make it to the night show to be going against him and Steve Chirata and Rudy. And it was a big jump. It was like Rudy at 9 years old, killing it. And then you have like Kalman and Steve at 17. And I'm stuck in the middle. It's like, damn, he's really good. Damn, they're really good. You know, I'm just kind of like, average in the middle. It's just, I would just be happy kind of to be on the stage and hope not to suck and just keep up. And this is back when it was runoffs, not the CMX grands and then the overall grands.
I was about to say, were your overalls back then always 17 and under?
Yeah, it was 17 and under and open and traditional. So sometimes, you know, not me, but you'd be going against like John Sue, traditional, you know. Boys and girls were together, then they split it. And even that, like earlier on, it would be like Stephanie Flowers, her style forms, then like Anthony Atkins, you know, it's completely different.
Yeah.
So, and the only thing that changed was tournament to tournament. They would say sometimes it'd be 3 people, sometimes 5. Sometimes like for third place, they would be a tie. So they'd be like, we'll take all 4 or 5 or whoever, you know, so there's more than one person. But really that just mattered the order you went in the night show. You didn't draw. So if you won the runoffs, you went last. So sometimes you would just do like an okay form just to make it in, fake your competition out, then boom, you do it in the show. Mark C did that to me once.
Yeah? Wait, tell that story. That sounds cool. I mean, not cool that you lost, but like just that strategy.
Yeah, no, just bluegrass. I think I won the tournament before, maybe 2 tournaments. I'm not sure. I was hyped up in runoffs. This one had like different variations and stuff, so I was just throwing them out. Boom, boom, changing combos. Everyone was excited. Mark did his normal form. It was okay. I beat him. It's fair. Then we went to the night show, and he did a 1080. And the first time ever doing a 1080, not a backside 1080, a real 1080 off 2 feet. And he didn't just do that, he comboed it. And then I was going after him. So from a strategy standpoint, he just did that. Crowd goes nuts. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I just didn't runoffs. I'm probably going to lose. So then I'm like upping my form. I had variations ready to go, but it's like, I was not prepared for this. I thought I was going to do the same thing. And
that's crazy. So wait, that was his first 1080 in a form, or that was the first 1080 in a form?
That's the first 1080 in a form and his first 1080 in a form. The only other person to do that was several years earlier, Kim Do. He's the first person ever to do a 1080 off 2 feet, but that was just tricking on the sidelines, not in an actual form.
Right. That's crazy. And I love the culture back in the day, right? Where if you wanted to really be the first one to get credit for a trick, you had to do it in a form, right? That's when tricking was still like more heavily tied to sport karate and not really its own thing.
We'd be like, nope. Doesn't count. You have to do it in your form. And you got to stick it. Ugh.
All right, now I'm not going to bail you out completely. Let's get back to that top 5.
Okay.
So I gave my like kind of sort of list, but what is your, if you had to go, and I know CMX hasn't been around forever, but that genre, creative musical extreme type competitors, forms and weapons combined, top 5.
Forms and weapons combined. This would be my list. I hope I can think of 5. Rudy Raynon for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is 1, 2, 3, 4. I got to think about.
You don't have to go in order. It's whatever.
But Rudy could possibly be number 1. Rudy Raynon, John Valera, Jimmy Pham.
Ooh, I should have thought of Jimmy Pham. That's a good
Mark Canonzato.
Yeah, Mark's good.
I feel like I should do somebody new nowadays. I don't know. It's 4. I'm trying to think of 5th one. There's a lot. I feel like there'd be a tie for number 5. There's a lot of good competitors. I'd have to really think about it. You have to line up wins, and sometimes it's not just wins for me. But
another thing I just thought about. There's the women's division too. And what's crazy about the women's division is that especially like post 2000 at least, all of them are good at both forms and weapons. Like if you look at the women's division, like Caitlin, forms and weapons, Mackenzie, forms and weapons, Sammy, forms and weapons, Haley, forms and weapons. Like, whereas the men like often will specialize, not always, of course, you were both, right? As an adult, Kalman specialized. I obviously specialized, right? But like I feel, and even like the others in my generation, right? Even though Reed won a lot of overalls with forms, he was known as a weapons guy. Cole was a weapons guy. Pinto was a forms guy. Tyler did both. Tyler effectively did both. And Reed effectively did both. That's I think Reed won 2 diamonds with forms. But I'm going down rabbit holes now, right? But I want to show some respect to those women's competitors too, right? Because like all of those greats from the last like 20 years, all of them did both, which is pretty cool.
So then you go Mackenzie Emery, forms, weapons, tricking, sync.
Yeah.
Would be the top.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah. Kenzie's versatility. And also like there was a time period where I don't think that often the best tricker for either male or female on the planet was also the best extreme forms competitor, right? Because I remember when I first knew of tricking, I think it was like that period when Velu was kind of considered the best tricker in the world. You know what I mean? But he's not going to go out there and do a form, right? And at that time, you probably would have been the top forms guy, right? So for Kenzie to like simultaneously be the best female tricker on the planet, but then also be the top CMX forms competitor in her division, right? Obviously, when she was the best tricker on the planet, Caitlin was in the adult women's division winning. Kenzie was a junior, right? Which is also crazy. She was the best female tricker in the world as a junior, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, speak a little bit to that because Kenzie was on Team Emig, so you obviously got a lot of info on her.
Yeah, like you just said, as a junior, and then I think, like you said earlier too, going against great people makes you better. Mackenzie was going against Micah Carnes. I think that was in 14 to 17 as a junior.
I was in a few of those grands. That was the years that we did 17 and under. So it would be like me, Kenzie, Micah, Dana Hewer. Yeah, Austin Crane.
So I think that's what makes you better. And even if you lose, years later, nobody cares. I don't remember the times you won and lost. You just see the performance and go, that's my favorite, right? For us, it means so much. Oh, I won this tournament. I won that tournament. No one really cares at the end of the day. It's just the performance, I think. But yeah, Kenzie was killing it as a 13 and under, and then as a 14 to 17 competitor, and then again as an adult. And then even for me, she had forms, weapons, tricking, sync, and traditional. I don't do traditional. And then towards the end of my career, I was even like, what am I known for? Weapons, forms, sync. I had it with Daniel and Austin and Steve Gerard, actually, if you count the sync trick battles, which was fun. Right. But tricking was like my weakness. Not weakness, but I was less known. So I'm like, you know what? And that's when I started making more videos. YouTube was the biggest platform at the time. So I'm like, I'm just going to pump out a bunch of trick videos and start going to some trick gatherings. That's when I moved to LA. So I was training more at Jam, some more trickers around. So I was focusing on building my tricking up because I felt like that was the weakest of everything. But yeah, I didn't have traditional like Kenzie and yeah.
Well, you bring up sync and you bring up you and Austin, right? Because you and Austin, you guys might be okay. My favorite team sync ever is Lauren and Casey. Lauren and Casey's team sync's my favorite.
That was a good one. That was really good.
Yeah. But like you and Austin is like right up there. I absolutely love because I never got to see Lauren and Casey live. You and Austin were my favorite sync form that I ever got to see live. right?
You never
But I
seen it
also
live?
feel like, what's that?
You've never seen it live?
No, I've never seen Lauren and Casey's live.
Oh, okay. That was before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw you and Austin's live, and I'm saying you and
Mhm.
Austin's was like my favorite that I ever saw live. You know what I'm saying? So, but I feel like to a lot of people, especially looking back on it today, like that pairing seems random. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like a lot of people today would be like, oh, well, yeah, of course, like Matt and Danny did sync. That makes sense because y'all did do sync, right? But then I feel like you and Austin as a pair comes out of left field for some people, right? So how did that get started? Because I mean, I think you guys are in most people's top 5, top 10 all-time great sync teams. So how did that all get started?
Before Austin was on Team Paul Mitchell, we were watching Runoff, Steve Babcock and I, and Austin was killing it. He was younger, and he won. And then we turned, and I'm like, he's really good. We should put him on the team. And he was like, do team forms with him. And I'm like, I don't know. You can't just randomly say 2 people. Then like a year later, he got on Paul Mitchell. And then that was always in the back of my mind, like do team forms with him. And then actually, when did he get on? I think I was injured and I came back. I was coming back from my knee injury.
Yeah.
So Austin's on the team.
Would have been early 08? No.
I got hurt in 08. I think he got on in 09 or 10.
Yeah. No, because
Something like
Kalman, he got on with Kalman, and Kalman won 2 diamonds before.
So 2010.
On Paul Mitchell? Yeah.
2010. And that's when I was just coming back from my knee injury. And I feel like now in the year and a half I had off, I only really trained for about 6 months, not even a couple months. I was resting up for a whole year. I was not allowed to train. I feel like I became like the older guy, and I was like the older guy in the division. I'm like, this sucks. And then there's like new blood, younger generation, Austin Crane, you know, he had the Bieber hair back then. And he had all the newer tricks. And I'm not even saying like on a difficult level. I'm talking about he's doing like flick flacks and like the whatchamacallit move, the no-handed scoot or whatever. I forgot what they call it now. He's like doing all these new tricks. So we were just bonding. I was hanging out with Kalman. You know, then he was cool. We were cool with each other. I'm like, we should do sync forms. And I'm like, all right, let's just do it. And then at the same time, Kalman had me come out to his school to teach at a training camp they were having in Atlanta. So I'm like, we'll make up a sync form then. Actually, no, at Bluegrass, we made up a couple things Sunday after the tournament. We decided to do teams. We brainstormed a couple ideas, whatever. Then we went to Atlanta. And at this time, I could not do a lot of tricks. Like I only had a handful. Like what you seen me do in my form was the moves I could do. And if you look, everything was landing on my right leg. Even like triple flash, I switched the way I do it. I went right, left, right before I would go left, right, left, you know? So yeah, I learned the corkscrew that day. Touchdown cork, I got it back. And when you see it, you'd be like, oh yeah, it's fine. It looks good. That's what everybody was saying. But for me, it was like, oh, it was a big buildup. It was really tough. And it was scary and just took a lot more energy out of me. So we were tricking and he was leveling up. That was like the first time I think I'd seen Austin do a J-step double cork, I remember. But we were just tricking. We're messing around. We came up with the sync form. I think we made up like half the form. And then he came to LA. We finished making it up. That was like the following weekend, maybe. Then we went to US Open. We're like, should we compete at US Open? And I think that's what our gimmick was. It was just hype. It was just random. He was the hyped up junior. I was like the older forms competitor, trying to make a comeback. We had hyped music. We didn't tell anyone we were going to do it. And honestly, we didn't know until Thursday night. We were like, all right, let's see. And then I think we let his mom and Kalman and a few others watch. And we're like, you guys tell us if it's dope or not. If it's good, we'll do it tomorrow night. And yeah, that was it. And then we performed it one time. And we nailed it. Even that circle combo, we didn't even know if we could do it.
That's crazy. Because the circle combo, that's like the iconic, that's like what made the form.
I remember when we did it too. I remember like I turned my back. I'm like facing the other way. And we go. I was so nervous doing this 720 raise cork. Then once I got past that, and he was gassed in that part. He was fast on that part. Once we got past it and we turned around, I remember the 540 touchdown flash was super easy for me. He kind of slowed down the 540 because he was bending around towards the back end. And I remember every time we did it too, we would cork and we would touch shoulders. We would gently touch shoulders. And
No
then sometimes on
way.
the 540, yeah. We'd be like, ugh, ugh. And then the hardest part was we landed facing outward. So we couldn't hear, he couldn't hear my cue. And the crowd would always go nuts. So even if I did cue, he can't hear it. So we always just guessed. It was like, hold it. And then it's like a 1, 2, 3, go. That was the hardest part, actually, after the combo was like syncing back up.
That's crazy. See, that's the reason why we do these podcasts, is to know that Matt Emig and Austin Crane would touch shoulders coming out of their corks.
Almost every time.
So you talk about like those iconic performances, right? Like I specifically remember one of you and Austin sing for him from Diamonds that for whatever reason, the energy was like particularly crazy, right? So I'm just, it's the easiest question to ask. It's the hardest question to answer. What do you feel like was your best performance? Like if somebody said, I want to see Matt Emig at his best, what video are you pulling up?
Man, honestly, I could give you a form for every year I've ever competed probably and be like, this is one of my best. And everyone has a different opinion of, I've heard people talking about, this is your best form. This is your best form. Just going off the top of my head, a few of them. Guatemala for forms. U.S. Open 2003 for forms. That was the first time I did a raise cork combo. Trying to think.
The Guatemala video. I remember Danny Etkin showed me the Guatemala video. And I remember we watched that video so many times. So I know about that form. My personal favorite was 08 U.S. Open.
08 U.S. Open is good.
That was the first time that I saw you do the rodeo cork and then hold it and then keep spinning around. And it was the shampoo bottle uniform, which everybody knows is my favorite. Yeah.
U.S. Open 2008. There was a couple other good performances that year. I did the same form, but I don't know if it's on the internet anymore.
I know Ocean State's 08 is. We just posted on the page.
That one was okay. That was like me getting back into my groove. I'm like, all right. I think this is my form. That was always the hardest part, like knowing what to do. What do the judges want to see? What does the audience want to see? And what do I want to do? Because sometimes I didn't want to do what I knew I could do to win. I'm like, no, I know all I have to do is to go up there and do this. But I don't like that. I'm sick of doing this format for the last 3.5 years. I have to break the format. And then I would do stuff, and then you fail a bunch of times, or you just have an okay year. Looking back, I know I could have won, but it was more than just getting those wins, you know?
Right.
I was thinking like long term. So, but yeah, Chuck's Diamonds 2011, going against Kalman that last time. 2003, any Chuck form from that year. Because again, I broke the format. Instead of going corner to corner, doing a backflip spin on the Chucks. It's the first time I did a round off X out, going towards the judges, and I hit my legs in between my legs, the Chucks in between my legs. That was the first time. Then I was at the judges. I did a raise, passing the Chucks through my legs, and I moved to the back. And even the beginning, that was the first time everyone does strikes in every weapon. They do strikes and they stay in the same spot or they move forward. That's when I was like, yo, to do this X out, I have to do Chucks moving backwards. So then I did something that I normally would do, but I was doing it moving in a backwards direction, almost like on the defense. So they just changed things. And that's when I started getting really creative. So any of those Chuck forms from that year. Compete Nationals 2003 as a freestyle. Straight up.
That's cool. I gotta go look that one up. I don't recognize that off the top of my head. I gotta go look that up.
Yeah, that was there was a series of issues that day. My back hurt. I was injured. I was not training. Sammy Vasquez moved up into the division. This was the start of the Sammy Matt war. He came into the division. He did the same combo I think I did at Diamonds the previous year, which was like the last time I think I competed. He went 540 raise gainer, which seems very generic now. But at that time, that was like a signature combo, you know? He did it better than me, faster, and he did the splits. So I'm like, I didn't even know if I could pull that off with my back. And I didn't know what to do. And then back then you had mini disc players. This is before iPods. So that's how you plug your music in. So the song they played, they didn't have it plugged in correctly. So it was playing. So I raised my hand. I'm waiting. I'm thinking they're just like, you know, turning the switch on. I don't know. And then I didn't even have an intro, to be honest. I spun around and the music was already playing like without it plugged in. So as soon as I spun around, I heard the music go and the drop was coming. So I was like, oh, and I did no intro. I just went. Then I just started freestyling. I did something I did at a local tournament. It was one of my best freestyles ever. It was one of my top forms ever. It's pretty lit. I messed up at the end. I fell. I did a B twist to the splits and I didn't make the split.
I
I still took third.
But see, that's what I love is that like sometimes the forms that we love the most are the forms where like, but I fell or but I dropped at the end or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that because there's not many people brave enough to go out and like a NASCAR night show, especially like a big tournament, and just totally freestyle.
That was in the division.
Like
actually,
that's one thing. As bad as that was just a division.
That was a division.
But either way, right? Yeah. Like that was one thing. I always told myself I wanted to do a freestyle in my career. But I was very much a win focused competitor. I was like, no, I'm leaving here with the overall, right? And so my mentality of win first, that often inhibited the little part of me that was like, go out there and freestyle, see what happens, right? So like the fact that you actually went out there and did it, and then you still got the accolades that you have throughout your career, like having the guts to go out there and freestyle, like that in and of itself deserves a lot of respect. And I think it goes back to like that philosophy you were talking about, which is like, you had personal goals for yourself. Like there were things you just wanted to do in a form. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was times where I knew I could win if I did this. But then there was at the same time, I always listened to the people in my division, people I respected, older, younger. And same thing nowadays on social media, read comments. Sometimes you got to ignore it. Can't read everything. But sometimes people would be like, oh yeah, Matt does the same stuff. Oh, I'm sick of it. Oh, it doesn't look like he's trying. And I would be trying, but I just, I wasn't bringing it like I was the underdog because at times you're at the top. So sometimes it was fun to just kind of mix it up and just throw everybody off. And then if I looked at it, sometimes if I failed, then, can't win them all. It motivated me for the next one. So like that time I freestyled and I lost, I messed up. This was the start of the Sammy Matt war. The next day, that was musical forms on a Friday night. The next day, John Paul was coming. This is compete nationals. And he was only coming from he was coming for a specific time frame. And then he was leaving. And like, well, who's competing at that time? Just me. And I lost the night before. And I have to go against Sammy again. So I have to win in front of John Paul. If I don't, this is bad. He's going to see the one guy on the team lose, and then he has to leave.
And that was 20th anniversary, right?
2003, yes.
Yeah. That would have, because that's the reason he would have been around. And that's the year y'all went to Malibu and everything, right?
Actually, I think the anniversary is 2002, 2012. Yeah, this is the year after he just came.
It's on the twos, but
it's on the twos, yeah.
Okay,
I think he just happened to be in town, or he's not busy, or something like that. I don't know.
Wait, that was terrible math because we were, 87 is when Paul Mitchell was founded.
Yeah,
the karate team.
He came, I won, but I was so nervous. Then I did a structured form. Trust me, this is the most structured form you've ever seen me do. I was like, I did everything perfect. I don't even think I should have won, to be honest. But I did, and I was happy because he was there. And then another time, actually, a few tournaments later, U.S. Open, he came. We knew he was coming. We didn't know when he was coming and who he was going to watch. And I performed, and I actually lost in the runoffs to Mark. But it didn't matter because they take top 3 to the night show. You just got to get in the top 3, top 4 at that time. And I remember I was super proud because I lost and I knew I killed it. It was one of my best performances. That was when you have a new form and you're working on it, you're perfecting at each tournament. You're adding a new move and you're polishing it up. US Open runoffs, I killed it. That was the best I've ever done. I lost. I didn't care. And then at the end, when I finished, in front of everybody, John Paul, it was quiet. He screamed out and he was like, that's what I'm talking about. And he said something. Everybody turned and looked at him and then looked back at me. I was super proud. I was like, yeah, made the boss happy. But yeah, that was one of my favorite Chuck forms.
That's really cool. That's really cool. That's awesome. So a lot of times, because I'm a nerd, as anybody who watches this show knows. And so I have these conversations all the time with other people. I'm like, well, what was your favorite Matt form? What was your favorite John Valera form or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And the most common response that I get from new era competitors is the 2011 Kalman form, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that situationally, right? Because a lot of people say that that was the best nunchuck form they've seen you do, right? And they've got a point. It was an awesome nunchuck form, right? You killed it. But talk about your perspective on that night, because Kalman was one of the few at a very public retirement, right? Everybody knew that was Kalman's last form. If I remember the story correctly, there was even something that happened with the order that you guys were competing in. I want to hear that part of the story too. Yeah. But how tough is that being in that position? Like knowing that, the guy who's been winning the diamonds for however many years and has won the US Open however many times in a row and all the accolades that Kalman earned, right? Now he's got this super public retirement and you're the guy that's got to go up and try to beat this guy who's trying to go out on top, right? And obviously, I mean, I still remember I was in that room. I remember the emotions in the room, right? Like you could feel it. So tell us, being the guy in those shoes, and definitely give that little detail about the order of competitors, because I know there's
So Kalman and I are friends, but night show comes, we mean business. It's competitive. So earlier in the day, creative weapons, we don't go against each other, bladed, non-bladed. I lost to Corey Lucas. It was fair. Actually, he roasted me. I fell off. I didn't do all my moves. I knew if I took top 2, I would win. I would secure my world title for the year. So I'm like, you know what? I think I'd rather take second right now. I don't know if I could top Corey. And I was messing up. Like I was butterfingers and I just felt off. So Corey roasted me. Then we went to runoffs. And I was kind of depressed. I'm like, damn, Corey's going to beat me. Kalman's, this is his last tournament. Who knows what he's going to do? And I think Kalman was feeling the same way. Like, oh my gosh, my last tournament, I had this big build up. I'm probably not even going to make it to runoffs. I think there was just a lot of weird energy. So I was kind of like, I don't even care. They started the runoffs. I think I went last. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to do in my form. Because I always designed my forms where I could take things out, put things in. I could always upgrade, downgrade, move things around, whatever. And then I remember Austin was next to me, Austin Crane. I didn't even have my uniform on. He's like, dude, you got to compete. I'm like, I know. I was putting my uniform all slow, my belt. I'm like, playing my music. I'm like, I don't even care. I guess the Molly Cruz song, I don't know. Probably going to lose, whatever. And then I did the form that I did in the night show. I just kind of pieced it together quick. I was like, I'll do what I did at White Lotus the other day. That was flowing nice. It's going to trickle. I don't feel like doing those extra releases. Probably just do one, whatever. I don't know. Kind of just pieced it together real quick. Did it. Everybody loved it. Everybody was really feeling me in the runoffs. And I was really surprised, actually. I was like, yo, I don't know. I feel like it was weird. Night show came. It's Kalman's last time competing. So I want him at his best. He probably wants me at his best. Like we just talked about. He doesn't want his last tournament. He went against who? Nobody. Right. I messed up. I want to beat him at his best. So I could be like, I'm the best. And he's thinking the same thing. We drew cards. I think he went like second or third. And I was like, I think last or second to last. It was like way later. It was a big division. Men, women, traditional, open. And then he went up. I was just so hyped. And I just wanted to keep that energy up. And I'm like, you know what? There's no way I'm going to wait for the energy to die down. And then like several minutes pass and then I go up. No way. I'm going like back to back right after Kalman. I want it to be Kalman and then me. And not just from a competition standpoint. I think it's just more entertaining, And I think that's one of my best Chuck forms. But Kalman killed it. He completely deserved it. He was better. But I don't care because he pushed me. And that's what was sad about the whole thing. I wasn't going to be able to compete against Kalman, who's also my friend, who also pushed me for several years to be better. So this is the last opportunity I get to level up, to do a better performance. And he was so hyped that he succeeded in that. He leveled me up because everybody says that's one of their favorite forms that I've ever done. So to me, it doesn't matter that I lost. It matters that I pushed and did one of the best Chuck forms I've ever done. And he did that by his performance, And also to return the favor, I wanted to kill it, not mess up and go, oh, Matt screwed up. I wanted to do the best performance ever. So then he won. He could say he beat me at my best. That's a good way to go out, Not he won and, everybody was okay. Mark wasn't there. Matt messed up. Rudy stabbed himself in the arm with his comma, like you don't want to hear that. So I feel like it was my duty to, step it up. And he, of course, stepped it up. He did a blindfolded sword form, which was insane. So that was a lot of fun, to be honest.
That's awesome. And I love your perspective on it because it's like your mentality was always first about the crowd and about the moment, right?
Yeah,
like
about the moment.
I look at it and it's just so interesting the difference in mindset because I look at that like if I was in your shoes, right? And I knew that Kalman was going out and this was his retirement tournament, right? And I had drawn that last card. my win first mentality is like, oh, this is perfect. Like he's going to have the moment, the crowd's going to be crazy, and then they're going to shut up while the other guys are going, and then I'll be able to have my moment at the end, hopefully steal the momentum, try to get the win on it, right?
Yeah.
But then like I absolutely love the fact that immediately you were like, no, next to each other. Like, forget everything else. Like for this moment, this is crazy. And it did. Like it made the moment better.
And we're still talking about it 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, creating that moment was important. And again, I might not have, if it wasn't his last tournament and he do a blindfolded double sword form, I might not have done the performance that I did. And if I went a couple minutes later, I might not have done that same performance. I might have changed it actually. I might not have been as hyped. So that's why I just wanted that energy, And plus too, I get off with when the crowd's going nuts. So everybody went so crazy for Kalman. I'm like, I need to use that energy. I need to steal his energy. Him walking off the stage, you can absorb that energy, when someone walks by you, and the crowd too. And then they're like, oh, now Matt's up. And then everybody's super hyped. So I was just trying to live in that moment. And, I'm happy the way it went.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. And it makes me think, and this question's going to seem random, but that's something that's so special about Paul Mitchell, is that like Paul Mitchell has always sought to have those moments where it's like, we've got the best 3, 4, 5 weapons guys in the world, and they're all on our team. And by the way, like they're all going to be buddies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, that year was Rudy, Mark, Kalman, and myself.
Yeah. Which
pretty
is
much
every tournament. So segue for that question is, because a lot of people don't know this, but Paul Mitchell, we intentionally rotate roommates. So it's like every time you go to a tournament, you're going to wind up with a different roommate. Like I've roomed with Zoltan Laszlo before. I've roomed with Justin Ortiz before. Like I've roomed with almost all the fighters that we've had since I was on the team, with the exception of the fighters who were on when I got on. Like I never got to room with like Greg Betlock and those guys, which is also kind of crazy with our timelines, because your retirement tournament was US Open 2012, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the tournament where I got on the team. So we were teammates for one tournament, and then that was it.
US Open, and I think Diamonds.
Did you do Diamonds 2012?
Yeah, and Capital Classic.
You did. That's right. So, okay.
You came in like halfway through the tournament.
Yeah.
That was already like Friday night. You have a new uniform on.
I know, right?
Yeah, there was like 3.
We had like 6 months as teammates, right? But my question is, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it was just, I feel like I wish we had more time. You should have got on earlier, actually.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think we might touch on that a little bit, because there was a lot of inspiration for that for Team Emig, right? Is people who you thought should have gotten on the team earlier, right? But just briefly, fun question. Who was your favorite Paul Mitchell roommate of all time? Because we rotated a lot. So
we didn't rotate that much when I was on the team. I mean, maybe now that's what you guys do. At the time, you had like a roommate, and that was it. And then when one person like didn't come or stopped, it kind of screwed up the whole system. You were like, oh. So yeah, Daniel Sterling would be my pick. He's like my big brother. Plus, I was going to tournaments by myself. I don't think they trusted me. Like they thought I was gonna be like irresponsible or something. I wasn't gonna show up on time. I did always. I was always on time. I was always prepared. But I think they always had this, he had to be there, like chaperone me, kind of. I don't know. Which I always thought was funny. I was like, what?
Well, I think for a while you were kind of the young guy. You were kind of the kid on the team, right?
Yeah, I was. And that one time I was the only kid on the team.
Mm.
And then I used to get jealous because then they'd be doing polls and they'd be like, who has the best junior team? And they'd be like, straight up, this team. I'd be like, what about Paul Mitchell? What about me? I was only one person, but I was trying to represent for the whole team. I'd be counted off those lists. I was upset.
I feel that. So yeah, it's a good segue. So you mentioned that like maybe I should have gotten on Paul Mitchell earlier, right? They've got their process. It's whatever, right? Hindsight 2020, I guess. But what's so nobody knows this, because I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the podcast, but I was almost on Team Emig. Like I remember the conversations when Team Emig was first happening, and I think it was more so you and my parents, because I was still like a kid at the time, right? But there was like conversations, and I was like, man, it might be a good idea. I like it. And then like in the middle of all that kind of happening is when Paul Mitchell ultimately called, right? Yeah. But if you look at Team Emig, to my understanding, Team Emig was really made up of athletes that you were working with, that you were training, that you were like, they should be on Paul Mitchell already. And because they're not on Paul Mitchell, I'm going to take them. I'm going to put them on my team, right?
Yeah, and basically that's why I thought of you too, because you were a top competitor. You were cool. You bonded with everybody. And then I'm like, these are the people that should be on Paul Mitchell. And some more. And it was always because I feel like we talked about it earlier. Sometimes, there's like a generation gap. Like people stop competing at the same time. And then it's like there's no one new to fill that. It takes a couple of years. It's kind of weird. So I feel like they were kind of stuck, or it was like, we're all about to stop competing. You need to fill those spots up and probably not try to replace Rudy Reynan, Mark Canonzato, Cal Menchoka, and myself. You should probably just get a younger generation and they'll turn into that generation, which is what happened. Just get them earlier. And so
which is kind of what's happening like right now too, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. History repeats, it's just the same thing. You guys all stop competing weirdly at the same time. And it's weird how that happens. Yeah. But yeah, so that's why I did the team. I was like, we should have these people on Paul Mitchell. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do my own team. That's why you were one of the people. But at that time, you already got on Paul Mitchell. Yeah. Those last like 2-3 tournaments that I was competing, and actually each tournament, like U.S. Open was gonna be my last tournament, and then like every month, Steve Babcock would call me. Like, come on, just compete. You'll win prize money. I'm like, you don't know that. You don't know if I'm gonna win. Like, I might not. And he's like, oh, it's paid for. Come on. And he would convince me. And then, the next tournament, same thing. Like the last 3 tournaments, he was convincing me to compete.
Hey, bro.
And I did. Then I'm like, Diamonds will be the last.
Bro, you gotta come to Diamonds, bro.
No, that's basically, yeah. And then I didn't want to like retire like an official thing because I just wanted to leave it open. And then,
That's cool. So now we've talked a bunch of sport karate, and I know we're already running a little long on the show, but obviously, like the phase of your life that you're in right now, and what like the rest of the world knows you for now is the stunt industry, right? So I want to just give you an opportunity to talk about that some, and it's also ridiculously cool, right? So let me go to one of my stock stunt questions. Actually, this is a good segue from sport karate to stunts. Because I want to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because you kind of did that like right as, I don't remember if you were already retired or you were about to retire from sport karate, but it was like all right on top of each other, right? And you actually played a couple of characters in the Ninja Turtles, right? I know you were, and correct me on this terminology and stuff, I think you were like the primary stunt guy for Master Splinter, right?
Yeah, in the first one, and then the second one.
Stuff for Michelangelo, of course.
Some stuff, Yeah, I did Splinter in the first one, some stuff for Mikey at the end, which ended up getting cut anyway. And then the second one, I was Michelangelo. And it was a perfect first movie because it's sport karate, and I was doing nunchucks and we're flipping around and stuff. And that's pretty much one of the things that got me into sport karate, the Ninja Turtles, that style. And that style, that Mortal Kombat, Ninja Turtles, Power Ranger style is sport karate, So it was a perfect first movie for me.
That's awesome. And I wanted to talk about like, because it's funny, like first movie, you were Master Splinter, right? Yeah. But then somebody else was Michelangelo. Was it Jeremy Marinas? Yeah, Jeremy Marinas was Michelangelo. But like sport karate people would look at that and be like, how was Matt Emig not Michelangelo, right? So for the sport karate people, explain like how that works, because it's not really just about like, oh, well, Matt's like the best at Chuck, so he should be Michelangelo. It doesn't go that way.
It's not like we need to audition. We need the best nunchuck person and who's the best staff guy. They're looking for stunt performers. You have to be able to fall. You have to be able to wreck. You have to be able to fight. So Jeremy Marinas is one of the top stunt competitors, or not competitors, top stunt performers. I'm thinking sport karate now. Jeremy Marinas is one of the top stunt performers. So yeah, and then also goes by height and things like that. There's a lot of factors to it. So he's a great stunt performer. So they had him, and I was new at stunts. I wasn't even really in the game yet. I was still kind of backing out from sport karate. I mean, it's like saying, like, why didn't I get on Paul Mitchell? And you don't even go to NASCAR tournaments, Like, well, you need to leave your dojo first, get to some national tournaments, then you got to win, then you got to make, there's a whole list of things you need to do first, So I was kind of behind on that. But I'm friends with Jeremy. I'm friends with Daniel Graham. I'm friends with Anish Turfa. I'm friends with Jackson Spidell, who used to compete in sport karate tournaments. He was on Team Pro Rank. A lot of people forget about Jackson. He was on Pro Rank. He did sideswipe shows. So he was one of the turtles. So yeah, they needed a spot for Splinter. I completely forgot about Splinter, to be honest. And then Jeremy called me. He was like, yo, send me a video, an audition. do this and that, whatever. And then I just happened to be flying to New York on that Monday. And I'm like, wait, I'm going to be in New York on Monday. It was a red eye. I was going to get there Monday morning. And then he was like, forget the video. Just come Monday. So I auditioned live. I had to learn like 5 different fight scenes, completely different styles of fights. Forget actual like fighting styles. I had to fight like a rat. Like one of the styles was like crawling around and fighting like a creature. And then one of them was fighting with a stick, and then a stick and fighting like a creature. And then one of them was like Ip Man style. And one was just different. So you had to do that. I did a form. I did a nunchuck form. I had to do a bunch of stuff, and they videoed it. And at that time, I was trying to get into the game, and, you get rejected. So I'm like, it's probably not going to happen, whatever. And then like a couple days later, I was actually teaching Aiden Considine. I was at his house. And in the middle of the lesson, I got an unknown call. I'm like, wait a minute, let me take this. And then I booked Ninja Turtles.
That's crazy. That's another person. We had Aiden on the show. I think we did an Aiden and Danny show while we were all in Ireland one year. I guess it was the last year that we went to Ireland before COVID. Because I had like just started the podcast. I need to get Aiden Considine back on the show. He's a good.
Get Aiden on. Bring him on.
Of course, Aiden. If you're watching, we gotta get you on the show, bro. So now I got 2 generic stunt ones just to give you an opportunity to storytell, and then we'll get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna ask like the classic, like anybody who finds out you're a stunt man, right? What's the scariest stunt job that you've ever done? Like one that you were like iffy on if you should even try the stunt, stuff like that. Whether it was like one stunt or whether it was like the whole job, you were like, this is a bunch of crazy stuff.
Probably Ninja Turtles. It was my first job, my first time on a movie set. I did a lot of wire gags at the end, probably like 5 or 6. And it was my first time in a harness on a wire. For the people that don't know, you put a harness on, they attach a wire to you. They either pull you or set it off and you go flying, and there's different gags. So, this was my first time doing any of this, my first time on a movie set. I didn't want to screw up. So I was just nervous each day. I didn't know what to expect each day, to be honest. And so, yeah, not so much like looking back, dude, it's easy, but you just don't know what to expect or what to think. And you're just unsure of yourself. It's your first time doing it. So I'd probably say that's the scariest. And we did a lot of wire gags kind of high up too. So it's my first time doing like heights and different things. So
right. So would you say you kind of get desensitized to it? Like after those first couple of jobs, it's just like par for the course?
Yeah, but then it's always different. Like, have you ever done this wire gag before? And it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if you've done the same gag, you're like, oh yeah, I've done this. I can do this. Is no problem. And then usually there's always one element that's different. Turtles were wearing a shell on our back. It's a little different. You have weapons in your hands. Another show, you might have a gun, or you have to land on a surface that you're uncomfortable with, or there's always something different that changes it. So then it does make you a little bit nervous. But just like in competitions, you do it every tournament, you get used to it. It gets easier. There was a time where when I first moved up to adults and I wasn't making it to the night show every tournament. I missed a few tournaments. I wasn't in the show. Then I went to New England Open and I'm back on stage. I was nervous. I'm like, oh man, it's been a long time. Not really, but I lost that practice. My feet were sweaty. My hands were sweaty. I was extra nervous. So the same thing happens, you don't work for a minute, or you haven't done a gag similar to that, or your first time doing that particular stunt. One time I got hit by a car. I was nervous. Looking back, it wasn't too bad. At the time, I was really nervous. This extra's trying to talk to me, like, "Are you about to get hit by a car?" I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, and it's not like you just stand there and take it. I have to time this car coming around the corner, run down these stairs, make it, do a little acting performance, match the actor. So there's all these extra elements that you have to do that you don't want to say, oh, you forgot to do this. You looked over the wrong shoulder, or, and then you have to do it again, which you actually have to do it several times, but you don't want to waste one doing something stupid. So, there's always something that makes you nervous, but I think it's good to be nervous sometimes.
Oh yeah, it ups the level of performance, right? Like I was reading a study recently for some med school military stuff. It was like part of the training environment when you're training for like battlefield medicine, when like there's gunfire in the background and all that, is like you want to get people acclimated to a certain level of stress, because there's a threshold of stress that every human has, and you can change the threshold, but it's like, if you hit that threshold, performance goes way down and people just don't perform well. But within that level, you can introduce stress that elevates performance, right? And so basically, like, the whole theory is that you want to try to get to where, like, the combat environment is what causes people to, like, perform at a high level. You know what I'm saying?
You're gonna have to send me that link later.
Yeah, I'd have to go. I think there's a couple of we heard talks on it, and like there's some things that I can send to people, and there's some things I can't.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
That's why I changed the order of going last to right after Kalman. So I would hit that stress level, you know?
Exactly. So I think that's so cool because that's a real thing. Like, there's a level of stress that causes people to not get worse, but to actually step up. And I think that's really cool. But now, so last stunt question, and this was the opposite of what made you the most scared, right? What was your most fun job? Like, what's like one day of work? What job were you on where you just had a blast being a stuntman? I mean, I assume every day's fun. But, you know.
Obi-Wan was great. We worked on that last year for 8 months. That was exciting every day because every day you go on set and you're in Star Wars world on a different planet or on a spaceship or something, just admiring just everything, all your surroundings. You're just like, wow, can't believe it. And it's either something that you remember from when you were a child or something new. You're like, what is that? Oh. You know, and then even reading the script before the show came out was exciting. That was insane. It's like reading a book that no one has read except for you or a few people, you know? And then again, like performing and working on it. And with the people that I got to work with, John, Aiden, Fong, Cha, Ross, doubled Obi-Wan. We had Daniel Graham on there, Justin Chang, Kenzie Emery. Who else?
That's a squad. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was fun. So it was exciting. One of my favorites.
And it's cool, like, getting to, like, just be on set with those people. You know what I'm saying? Like, people that, like, you knew your whole life doing sport karate and everything. So
yeah. Another fun moment too was Birds of Prey. There was a fight, and a lot of it got cut, and you know they edit changes. But there was a fight scene, and we were like kind of the cheesy martial artists. Like each gang had a different style of fighting. We were supposed to be like the cheesy martial artists that were like posing and you know before they fight. And that was myself, Craig Henningsen, Micah Carnes, Ross, Anise. I think that's it. But we all did sport karate.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. That we all came from the same thing, and then, you know, we got to do a fight scene together. And we were doing moves that, you know, I had nunchucks in it. You know, it was like Micah did staff. You know, it was funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What a way to end the show, man. Great stories. Always a good time having you on. If you guys want to hear more of Matt, go on back. It's on the YouTube channel. It was back before we had video, but I have the audio file up on YouTube. So it was episode 22. So go to Jackson Rudolph Podcast on YouTube. You can check out episode 22. Matt was on, and that was a little bit more formal and just like asking and answering questions, right? But no, I'm glad we got to do this and just kind of literally sit down and talk shop and hear some stories about stunts, man. So thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Closing thoughts for the audience.
I don't know.
Let's go to bed. Let's go get dinner. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, hey, thanks again, man. Really appreciate it. And for everybody tuning in, our sport karate audience, make sure you stay tuned to Black Belt Magazine this weekend for updates from the U.S. Capitol Classics 6A NASCA tournament. Believe there will be a Black Belt Magazine rankings update following the event that obviously is going to be impacted by who wins at the event. So keep a lookout for that. And then, of course, next week we'll be doing a recap episode on the podcast here. So probably having one of the overall grand champions from the tournament coming on the pod. Maybe try to get a fighter because we haven't had a fighter on the show in a while. So if you guys want to see some point fighters, drop those comments. Let me know. Matt, thanks again for coming on the show tonight. Really
Thanks for having me,
appreciate it.
Jackson. So it was fun catching up with you.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Shout out to Black Belt Magazine for making this whole show possible. Shout out to all you guys for tuning in this long. You can probably tell that I'm wrapping up, so you've probably already logged off. But this has been another episode of the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. I'm Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.
Later, guys.